następnym poziomie. Co Putin zaproponował wdowom po rosyjskich żołnierzach w zamian za ich poległych mężów, a także o tym, jak Rosja i Iran rozpętały prawdziwą wojnę o Wielkiego Pana. O tym i nie tylko w dzisiejszym odcinku. Będzie wiele ciekawych rzeczy, jeśli jesteś tu po raz pierwszy. Cieszę się, że Cię widzę i nie zapomnij zasubskrybować, żeby nie przegapić kolejnych odcinków. Zacznijmy od wspaniałej wiadomości. Pojawiło się nagranie, jak nasze rakiety Flamingo uderzyły w jeden z najważniejszych rosyjskich zakładów rakietowych. Kilka dni temu zaatakowano zakład w Wotkińsku. Zakład ten specjalizuje się w produkcji różnych typów rakiet balistycznych, w tym Iskander, Buława, Jars i Enżal. No i oczywiście Oresznik, a oto nagranie, jak Flamingo uderzyły w jeden z budynków tego zakładu. Zobaczcie sami. Po tym uderzeniu powstała dość poważna wyrwa. Specjaliści od analizy zdjęć satelitarnych ustalili, że rozmiar wyrwy to 30 na 24 metry. Wyobrażacie to sobie? W każdym razie. I ważne jest to, że ta fabryka w Wotkińsku znajduje się praktycznie 1500 kilometrów od granicy z Ukrainą. To znaczy, że to na pewno nie był Neptun, bo zasięg Neptuna to do 1000 kilometrów. No a patrząc na nagranie i rozmiar wyrwy, to na pewno nie był dron. Krótko mówiąc, ci, którzy mówią, że flamingów nie ma, a jeśli są, to nie latają, a jeśli latają, to jakoś nie tak, proszę bardzo. Oto dowód. Rosjanie teraz już na pewno wiedzą, że flamingi istnieją i mają się świetnie. Latają i skutecznie ich dosięgają. W ten sposób mamy potwierdzony dowód uderzenia ukraińskiej rakiety na odległość 1500 kilometrów, a to już zupełnie inne zasady gry. I jeszcze jedna ważna kwestia. To oznacza, że nasza rakieta przeleciała nad kilkoma rosyjskimi obwodami i nie została zestrzelona przez rosyjską obronę przeciwlotniczą. A do Moskwy, przypomnę, odległość jest 2,5 raza mniejsza niż do tego właśnie zakładu w Wotkińsku. Rosjanie mają się nad tym zastanowić, jeśli chcą. Ale to jeszcze nie wszystko. W obwodzie smoleńskim drony uderzyły w zakład chemiczny w Drogobórzu. W wyniku trafienia na terenie zakładu wybuchł ogromny pożar. Przypomnę, że ten zakład w Drogobórzu produkuje 90 000 ton saletry amonowej rocznie. Jasne jest, że azotan amonu, który tam produkują, trafia nie tylko do rolnictwa. Saletra amonowa to taki podstawowy budulec w produkcji materiałów wybuchowych i chemii wojskowej. No cóż, naprawdę mocno uderzyli. To już nie pierwszy atak na ten zakład. Wcześniej to przedsiębiorstwo zostało zaatakowane pod koniec zeszłego roku, w grudniu 2025 roku. Ten zakład jest kluczowym graczem w branży chemicznej regionu. Bardzo poważny cel. Lokalni mieszkańcy donoszą, że uszkodzona została główna autotermiczna instalacja syntezy, a to oznacza, że faktycznie kluczowy węzeł całej chemii azotowej zakładu został wyłączony z użytku. Jeśli ta informacja się potwierdzi, odbudowa może zająć co najmniej kilka miesięcy. To bardzo poważne problemy dla Rosjan. Ale to jeszcze nie wszystko. Tej nocy drony Sił Operacji Specjalnych Sił Zbrojnych Ukrainy przeprowadziły atak na sprzęt na tymczasowo okupowanym Krymie. Zostały trafione systemy rakietowe S-400.
Threats of war escalate in the Middle East as the U.S. military buildup continues. This graphic shows the recent buildup of U.S. air power in the Middle East. The Wall Street Journal reporting it's the largest in the region since the Iraq War in 2003. In Israel, the IDF Home Front Command has been directed to prepare for full-scale war. Iran is holding joint naval exercises with Russia and the Chinese. The regime is also calling on Hezbollah to join them in the event of a U.S. military strike.
There's many reasons and arguments that one could make for a strike against Iran.
U.S. military officials say they're ready to strike as early as Saturday. Leavitt reiterated that little progress was made during Wednesday's nuclear talks.
Diplomacy is always his first option, and Iran would be very wise to make a deal with President Trump and with this administration.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth told CBN News the decision to strike Iran lies with President Trump.
Should they not follow through on commitments, should they not be willing to make a deal, the president has an option. The only one that will make this decision well, two people will make this decision. The Iranians can step up and make a real deal, and then ultimately President Trump will decide whether or not it's a deal that's good enough for the American people.
Middle East political analyst Esther Braun says any deal with Iran should come with reservation. Braun recently wrote this Times of Israel article titled "Built to Deceive: Why Iran Can't Make a Real Deal," where she explains the Iranian Islamic tactic known as taqiyya.
Taqiyya was a survival mechanism. The believer could conceal his faith, conceal his style of life to save his life, to save his property, to save his community.
Braun says Western diplomacy wants to resolve conflicts. Iranian culture uses taqiyya to manage it.
It's not like they're lying because they have a purpose to lie. It's just the way how they see the whole process of negotiations.
While U.S. military officials say they're prepared to strike Iran as early as Saturday, President Trump is weighing his options.
So now we may have to take it a step further, or we may not. Maybe we're going to make a deal. You're going to be finding out over the next probably 10 days.
The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump is considering an initial attack on Iran, possibly within days, to force it to meet U.S. nuclear demands. The limited strike options include attacks on nuclear and ballistic missile facilities. If Iran still wouldn't go along, the U.S. could launch a broader military campaign in an effort to potentially overthrow the Islamic government. The journal also reports that there is still a wide gap with negotiations. Iran is refusing to limit its ballistic missile program and has said that no country can deprive it of its rights for nuclear enrichment.
And now is the time for Iran to join us on a path that will complete what we're doing. And if they join us, that'll be great. If they don't join us, that'll be great too. But it'll be a very different path.
If that path results in a full-scale war, a former U.S. Central Command deputy tells the Jerusalem Post the American military could dismantle Iran's power structure core within hours. Meanwhile, the European Union has formally added Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to its terrorist list, as Iran warns in this letter to the UN that if attacked, all hostile bases and assets in the region would be considered legitimate targets. The USS Gerald R. Ford is equipped to counter Iranian strikes. The aircraft carrier is expected to be positioned off Israel's coast to protect Tel Aviv and Haifa.
We're prepared for any scenario. And one thing is certain, if the Ayatollahs make a mistake and attack us, they will face a response they can't even imagine.
And while there are preparations for war here in the Middle East, the President's Board of Peace held its first meeting in Washington. In the inaugural meeting, Trump pledged $17 billion toward the reconstruction of Gaza. The board's plan also included more than 30,000 international soldiers and police officers to replace Israeli soldiers in Gaza, with Israel again saying it won't withdraw troops unless Hamas disarms.
That includes all its weapons, its terror infrastructure, underground tunnel network, and weapons production facilities must all be dismantled. There must be a fundamental de-radicalization process. The infrastructure that indoctrinates Palestinian children to hate and kill Jews in educational and religious institutes should no longer exist.
Paul Petit, CBN News, Jerusalem.
I'm joined now by our Middle East correspondent, Paul Petit. Great stories, Paul, about a really tough subject.
Oh.
What do you think's coming?
Yeah, frightening stories as well. You know, it's hard to say. We're in the sort of the chess game mode. I move this way, you move that. Trump constantly in the timeline for when he might attack. Building up with Russia doing drills with their Navy. So it's at this point, we'll just have to literally go day by day.
Yeah, the Jerusalem municipality sent out today this a little booklet, online booklet in multiple languages, and it's says to be ready for routine and unforeseen situations. But basically, it's all about getting where you go if there's an attack, and how to prepare your home, and how to relate to your kids when you're in the bomb shelter. So it's clear that Israelis are preparing.
Yeah, and there's an app that you can only get when you're actually an Israel home front command, it's called, which warns you of a missile attack. This is everyday life here in Israel for those that have never visited or been here, at certain times. And so, yeah, everyone's on high alert. Obviously, the command is on high alert here in Israel. Yeah. And what that means is everybody is poised. No one knows when it could happen, but we need to be prepared, as you're showing there. And an interesting footnote today, I learned that 59% of Israelis are in support of joining the U.S. Shooting around.
Yeah, I think because Israelis know if any deal with Iran is probably not going to go anywhere. They're just making a big show of the whole thing. They're not going to get rid of Hezbollah and Hamas. They want to keep funding them. So, for Israelis, that's very practical. I mean, it goes from terror attacks to war on the borders. It's not a simple thing. And, it's also the missile issue. They don't want to have anything. They want their missiles to defend themselves. Excuse me, but, if they weren't aggressive, they wouldn't have to defend themselves.
Yeah, and so that's where we're at in this point in time. And I think it's interesting the timing of the Board of Peace meeting, too, because it's sort of a model of what has to happen if it's done correctly in Gaza, what needs to happen in Iran. And the bottom line is that you just can't kick the can down the road and let them keep their missiles. In the case of Gaza, let them keep their arms, because it's only a matter of time until they get ready again and there's another attack on Israel. So it's really a regime change that has to happen. And so that's going to be the next question. How is that going to happen? And obviously many people in Iran want that to happen sooner the better.
Yeah, they do. And Israel has proven time and time again that you can't just, because they're not changing their ideology, they're not changing their goal of destroying Israel and getting rid of the Jewish state. So if that's the case, then you have to get rid of them first.
Yep, we'll see what happens.
Iran's Ayatollah regime declares, "We will not surrender," and the United States will observe an unprecedented attack. Despite a massive buildup of American forces on a scale that the world hasn't seen in many years, senior Iranian officials emphasize that the diplomatic option is still on the table, but they do not hesitate to threaten the strongest military in the world, and they refuse to say that they will not build a nuclear weapon. Intelligence assessments say that there will be a breakthrough this week, while the outbreak of war is far more likely. And here in Israel, 12 American F-22 jets have landed, together with more aerial refueling aircraft in the last 24 hours. This is part of the continuing American force buildup in the Middle East. In his State of the Union address on Tuesday evening, President Trump said that Iran has developed a weapon that can threaten Europe or our bases. The White House spokesperson added, "Iran chants death to America. You decide if that's a threat or not." Elsewhere, the United States sent a message in Persian to Iranian citizens saying, "We all know one truth right now. The United States can strike Iran in any way it chooses." So welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, and we're bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and in the Middle East. Tensions between Washington and Tehran are escalating as Iran threatens retaliation in response to an American strike, and the Ayatollahs are not breathing a single of relief in light of disagreements at the top of the American leadership regarding an attack. They are convinced that Trump's goal remains the overthrow of the Islamic regime, and they are even making contingency plans for the day after Khamenei, as there is a possibility that he might be eliminated or simply expired. He's almost 87 years of age after all. In Washington, the Washington Post reported this week that the United States has amassed in the region no less than a third of all its active deployed naval forces, as well as a large number of land-based air power ahead of a head confrontation. As the IDF and the Pentagon tighten operational coordination, the aircraft carrier Ford continues to draw closer. 12 Raptors, the most advanced aircraft in the world, landed in Israel this week, together with 2 more refueling aircraft. In total, more than 200 American fighter jets are already in this region, and the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford was spotted near Crete. So, it's within the striking range of Iran. Is it here for no reason? We'll soon find out. And against the backdrop of the forced buildup, and immediately after Trump's State of the Union speech, Iran is trying to project an image of calm, deliberation, and then the possibility of a deal that would prevent hostilities with Iran. President Pezeshkian declared that we support peace and stability. This is the president of Iran. And Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi of Iran said, we will not develop a nuclear weapon, while his deputy added, if there is will, an agreement is possible. However, at the same time, the IRGC is deploying ballistic missile launchers on the Iraq border, and with the help of Chinese satellites, they're monitoring US bases in the Middle East. They're also making videos, including footage of missile launchers in a drill on the southern coast. And according to Reuters, they are hoping to soon finalize a deal with China to purchase an anti-ship hypersonic missile, which would be a game changer. So TVN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will bring us a closer look today at how Donald Trump is trying to act as the responsible adult to all that war, and explain why Iran would get itself into trouble if it fires towards Israel. However, Israel, where I'm standing now, is also worried about pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and elsewhere jumping in to try and save the regime amidst the regional deterioration. But the Iranian regime in its own streets against it, students are protesting from universities in Tehran every single day for the past week, clashing with the in a sign that they have lost their fear of retaliation. For their part, the Revolutionary Guards admitting that the students have the right to protest, but there are red lines. But while everyone is looking at Iran, Israel's northern arena remains open as Tehran might pressure Hezbollah into an attack. Lebanon's internationally recognized government has a dilemma, as Israel has warned that if Hezbollah opens fire, the IDF will hit civilian infrastructure in Lebanon that Hezbollah depends on for its own use. But even now, before a war breaks out, Israel is striking Hezbollah infrastructure on a daily basis, and the IDF reports the thwarting of hundreds of attacks since the ceasefire began. This includes strikes on Hezbollah positions this week, which resulted in the elimination of senior Hezbollah. We have a lot to talk about today. But let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and this is your Boots on the Ground report with the whole truth about what's happening in Israel on day 872 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the control of the Revolutionary Guards Corps in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we start, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. If you want to know more about life in Israel and not hear lies that are funded by Qatar, look for Mati Shoshani and Yair Pinto on social media platforms and on TVN Israel, and stay connected on a daily basis. Make sure to hit the subscribe button also here on YouTube. In the last 24 hours, 2 more American refueling aircraft landed in the Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv in Israel, adding to the large number of American military aircraft that have already landed here over the past few days. At the same time, off the coast of Crete, the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford was spotted this week as it continues moving eastward. So, is this only pressure on the table that's headed for the next round of talks, or does this force already signal a move from ambiguity to a decision that was made? To understand where we stand, we can look at the American force posture in the Middle East and also in Europe as one operational array. There are already more than 200 American fighter aircraft that are deployed within close distance from Iran, and there are assessments that spark of more than 300 if you also include the aircraft deployed at bases in southeastern Europe this month. This is a mix of F-35, F-16, and F-15 aircraft, which have a range of complementary ground attack and also air-to-air warfare capabilities. And beyond that, there's also the quiet order of battle that enables war. More than 100 aircraft for refueling, command and control, intelligence, electronic warfare, and transport. This is not just numbers. This is the ability to keep an air campaign in the air over time, to deliver a real-time picture for the skies, and to launch waves of strikes without giving the enemy a chance to recover. When these assets connect to a broad American satellite array, the result is clear. Every missile launch, every movement, every electronic signal that is made by the Iranian forces has a higher chance of being detected faster. In Israel, they look at this through the defensive lens, as it gives a better warning, better response time, and on paper, also better readiness of the air defensive array, which includes the Arrow 3. In the naval arena, the picture is also very one-sided. Approximately one-third of the active and deployed U.S. Navy ships are now on station, within striking distance of Iran, including 2 carrier battle groups that are centered on the Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea, Salman, and the Gerald Ford in the Eastern Mediterranean. Although there are at least 12 destroyers in the region equipped with an air defensive capability to shoot down incoming missiles and drones. This is hundreds of Tomahawk cruise missiles that can fire back at the enemy. This is not just presence. It is an array that brings with it capabilities in air defense, interception, and logistics that enable rapid action forced by land-based assets. For example, there are indications that as many as 60 American aircraft have been deployed to the Muwaffaq Salat Air Base in Jordan, and altogether, there is talk of a movement of more than 150 aircraft to bases in the Middle East and southeastern Europe since the failure of the previous round of talks. Last, but certainly not least, we have to talk about the direct Israeli component, as 12 American F-22 aircraft landed here in Israel this week, and that sends a message of its own. The bigger message is the combination of American strikes and support aircraft that are deployed in Israel, including refueling and electronic warfare assets, together with command array capabilities of managing an extended or a short operation depending on the political decision. And let us not forget, Israel's own very capable Air Force, which will likely be part of any American-led operation against Iran. I wonder if America's other regional allies will also take part as they have in some impressive capabilities in the past. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section. You think other allies will join the battle? And amidst all of this, the Ayatollah regime is trying to project 2 things at the same time. We are open to an agreement, and don't be mistaken, we will respond. And senior Iranian officials declared that the diplomatic option is still on the table, but they also openly threatened that any strike will trigger a broad counter-response, and that there is no strike that will compel them to make concessions. The Iranian foreign minister speaks about returning to the talks in Geneva with determination to achieve an agreement, and emphasizes Iran will not seek to develop a nuclear weapon under any condition. Also, will not give up what it defines as a right to nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. At the same time, the deputy foreign minister there points to the operational risk, saying it is easy to start a war. The whole region will pay the price. All this tension will surely be felt on Thursday during the next round of talks in Geneva, with most analysts saying these are the last chance talks to avoid a conflict, and the chances of success are very low. And President Trump insists on zero enrichment of uranium with Iran, while the regime says it has the right to enrich and it will not back down for this principle. And Israeli officials say that they don't think this gap can be bridged. It is hard to see a real breakthrough, and the feeling is that the question is not if, but when. And on the American side as well, the messages are dual. On the one hand, diplomacy as a first option. On the other hand, readiness to use overwhelming forces if needed. And last night, in the State of the Union address, President Trump framed it in his language, declaring that Iran has developed a weapon that can threaten Europe or American bases. And in another statement before the speech, he claimed that Iran wants an agreement desperately, but cannot explicitly say it because it doesn't want to get rid of the nuclear program. The White House spokesperson also sharpened the simple argument to the public: Iran chants death to America. You can decide if that's a threat or not. Personally, it's a threat when somebody threatens me. This is not just rhetoric. It is the building of domestic political legitimacy against oppositions at home and against the national community that speaks in two voices, outward and in closed rooms, understanding what it is if the regime in Tehran comes out of this event strengthened. And meanwhile, on the ground and in the air, steps are beginning that smell like preparations for an escalation scenario. The United States is evacuating non-essential staff and family members from the embassy in Beirut, as well as military bases in Qatar and in Bahrain. This is a classic move of lowering risks and complications ahead of a regional development. India and South Korea have also called on their citizens to leave Iran immediately, but that won't be easy, as there are tens of thousands of Indian and South Korean citizens who walk in Iran. There are also reports of text messages that are reaching Iranian residents from an unknown source with a message that Trump is a manufacturer. This is part of the psychological war that all sides are now running. But the Iranian response does not remain at the level of threat. There are also indications of a deployment of missiles and rocket launchers along the western borders to enable rapid fire with American bases in Iraq and in other countries in this region. But that also puts those launchers in an easy range of the United States and the Israeli strike assets, especially Tomahawk cruise missiles. However, the IDF air defensive forces are noting that this time they will not only have to contend with long-range missiles that are under tighter monitoring, but short-range arrays that create a short fight time and many launch points, creating a complicated interception problem for the Iranian regime. And along the same line, there is a clear concern about pro-Iranian militias in Iraq joining in, adding their own arsenal of drones and missiles to the ordnance that's heading Israel's way. This possibility is being taken very seriously, along with the potential threat to aircraft flying over Iraq on their way to strike targets in Iran. These militias could also provide intelligence assistance to Tehran regarding American and Israeli movements in the region. And in parallel, reports are rising about increased chatter amongst terror elements as a hint of possible preparation for revenge attacks against American targets in Europe and in the Middle East, even if there are still no specific plots that are locked in. And within all of this, Iran is trying to show that the naval arena also has a card to play. There are reports that it is nearing a deal with China to purchase hypersonic anti-ship cruise missiles that the model is CM-302, with a range mentioned up to 290 kilometers and a 250 kilogram warhead. The speed and the low altitude flight path that they're capable of making them hard to intercept, and they can be launched from ships, from aircraft, or from vehicles. Even if it is noted that the missiles are not expected to arrive before a possible American attack, and that there is still no agreed delivery date, the very talk of a deal is a message to the Americans that their ships are vulnerable. This past week, there was also a report that the regime had signed a deal to purchase shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles from Russia, but the delivery of those weapons is years away, and it's not relevant to the current situation. Last, but certainly not least, the internal pressure against the regime has not disappeared. Street protests have continued for several consecutive days at universities in Tehran and in other cities, including chants against Khamenei and the regime, alongside calls in favor of the return of the monarchy and flags from the Shah era. On the other hand, the regime presents footage of supporters burning the flags of the United States and Israel. There are reports of clashes with the besieged militia and of dispersal of tear gas in certain hotspots to get rid of the protesters. The government spokesperson said Students have the right to protest, but there are red lines, and flags and holy places are lines that must not be crossed. However, the protesters appear to have lost their fear of the regime despite its brutal crackdown in January. The regime is trying to manage rising pressure from within, even as it must face overwhelming military forces from without. But here, in Israel, we're also trying to manage the tensions and wondering what will happen to us if the situation is actually exploding. The assessment is that if there is a direct American action, the Iranians will want to first invest their efforts against the American targets in the Gulf and in the Middle East, then to strike American interest in the region, and only at a later stage to slide towards Israel, because flying towards Israel could complicate them against two strong attackers in two arenas. But no one here is counting on Iran acting logically or in a proper way when an event happens of a war. So the home front readiness is being closely monitored. Closed-door discussions are being held, and lessons learned from previous operations are being reviewed, including a troubling data point that a significant portion of the population lives and works in buildings without a protected space, without bomb shelters. In the end, all this data connects to one simple truth. The United States can strike Iran in any way it chooses, from a limited blow to a broad campaign. And the question is what it chooses and when. For some answers to these questions, we now turn to TVN Israel's senior Middle East analyst, Mati Shoshani. But first, a moment before we continue, I want to invite you to keep spreading the truth. It's very important that you share what you see here on Boots on the Ground. Hit the subscribe button. Look for us on social media platforms. And I also want to take just a moment to tell you that if you love TVN Israel and want to be part of what God is doing in the land, we have something special for you.
Did you know you can invest in one of the world's most innovative economies, the nation of Israel, just as easily as you invest in American markets? That's why today I'm excited to introduce you to our friends and sponsors at Wise Money Israel, who I've personally known and trusted for many years. Their CEO and his family are longtime friends, and I trust them completely. Now, whether you're looking to elevate your 2026 investment strategy, diversify internationally, or support Israel and its economy, Wise Money Israel offers professional guidance to help you participate in one of the world's most dynamic markets. SEC-registered Wise Money Israel manages Israeli stock and bond accounts for investors from over 30 nations who want to capitalize on Israel's position as a global innovation powerhouse. Their Israel-based professionals provide expert access to companies in Israel's traditional and high-growth sectors. And as of today, Wise Money Israel manages about $100 million in client assets with integrity and biblical focus. If you're looking to fulfill your biblical mandate by supporting Israel, we highly recommend that you reach out to them. Click in the link description below or visit wisemoneyisrael.com/TVN for a free consultation today.
Now, we move to TVN Israel's senior Middle East analyst, Mati Shoshani. So, Mati, how do you see the diplomatic situation right now when, on the one hand, Trump is trying to be the responsible adult and avoid an all-out war, and on the other hand, he puts a loaded gun on the table? And why would Iran get itself into trouble if it fires towards Israel? That's a good question. Over to you, Mati.
Yeah, what you're really asking me is the following. Is Iran already saying openly that there's no such thing as a small strike, and its threat towards Israel is unequivocal? Then why are we still talking about diplomatic rounds? And what, in practical terms, are the understandings around the expected strike? So here are the central points right now. Diplomacy is still moving, but it's no longer an alternative to a strike. It's a narrow window right before a decision point. Last night, in his State of the Union address to Congress, President Trump framed the moment in terms of strength, deterrence, and American prestige. He said that America's enemies are afraid, that the U.S. military is very strong, and America is getting respect like never before. And in the background of that same speech, the reality is this: he is still weighing military action against Iran with no final decision at this moment. while the administration is expecting Iran's formal response to U.S. demands this coming week. That matters to viewers right now because it signals two tracks running at the same time. Negotiations on the table and an operation on standby. That standby posture is closer than it has been in a very long time. Now look at what Iran is doing in response. First, it's sending one clear message. There is no limited option. From Tehran's perspective, any strike opens a wider conflict. This is not a theoretical warning. It is their operational concept. They're not directing it only at Washington. They're aiming the threat at Israel as well. In other words, they're trying to deter both sides in advance by making the expected regional cost as high as possible. Now, at the very same time, Iran is not slamming the diplomatic door. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is publicly talking about returning to talks in Geneva as soon as possible, seeing a fair and equal agreement. But he repeats the core line. Diplomacy is preferred, yet not at the expense of national honor and national interest. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, Majid Takht Ravanchi, puts it even more bluntly. If there is an attack, Iran will respond according to its defense planning. And then he has a sentence everyone should hear twice. It may be possible to start a war, but it's not easy to end one, and the entire region will suffer the consequences. That is not a peace message. That is a warning first of the United States, but also very clearly at Israel. Now let's talk about the American side. The line coming through is that the United States is determined to exhaust negotiations, but it refuses to be strung along. No dragging, no deception. That's why Washington keeps the door open, but puts a clock on the table. And that clock, as it described from the Israeli perspective, is measured in a short time frame, not months. The message is, Iran gets a narrow window to deliver real answers, not a long game buying time. And meanwhile, in Tehran, they're not breathing easily. Yes, reports about internal disagreement in the U.S. leadership over a strike due to the risks and potential costs are welcomed by some voices in Iran. They interpret it as a lack of consensus in Washington, and as Trump trying to preserve the credibility of his threats without committing to a move that could ignite a regional war. That satisfaction does not change their bottom line. The military option is still very much on the table, which means, despite mixed signals, Iran is preparing for the worst. And this is where we reach the more dangerous layer. In Tehran, there's consensus that Trump's ultimate aim has not changed. Not just an agreement. In their view, the end goal is regime change, the fall of the Islamic system. So from the supreme leader's perspective, if Iran dismantles its strategic assets, if it gives up capabilities, if used as the backbone of deterrence, this will not save the regime, it will invite the next demand, and the next one after that. That is why you hear responses like, because we are Iranians. When asked why they will not simply concede. This is not just pride, it's a survival doctrine. Now look inside Iran itself. On the one side, the regime speaks about drafts, progress, historic opportunities. But on the other side, the public is counting coins. The picture and the material is of a society trapped between fear of war and economic pressure. We're seeing descriptions of inflation crushing the middle class, prices rising as Nowruz approaches, which is a national holiday, and currency volatility disrupting production and industry. The government tries patches, like electronic coupon programs, but the message from this trip is simple. You cannot cover a deep structural crisis in temporary fixes. So even when officials talk about an agreement, the public does not necessarily believe it will produce real internal change. And the social pressure within Iran is rising once again. Not always as mass marches, sometimes it comes through campuses, reopening in a dense atmosphere, memorial events, and a gradual return of unrest. Add to that something the region does not like to say out loud: preparations for extreme scenarios. The material reflects growing attention to the day after Khamenei, including even the possibility of him being targeted. That's why we see reporting about expanding authority for figures like Ali Larijani and about building continuity plans in advance. The internal message is, we're stable. The external message is, a decapitation strike won't break us. And these kind of messages really tell us what's real in Iran. So why keep diplomacy going at all? Because right now, It's the only tool that allows each side to attempt to gain something without setting the entire region on fire. The Americans want to exhaust talks to justify a decision. Well, either which way, the Iranians want to buy time, secretly, and above all, prevent a war that they themselves warned would become wide and uncontrollable. But on this map, one conclusion is hard to avoid. Iran is not prepared to surrender what it calls honor and national interest, and the United States is not prepared to accept what looks like delayed tactics. When those two conditions meet, the diplomatic window becomes incredibly short. So your question, Yair, gets a practical answer. We're still in diplomatic rounds because this is the last station before a decision. But the military preparations, the threats, and the tone all indicate the risk of escalation remains very high. Iran says there will be no small strike. The United States signals it will not accept a drawn-out process. And in between, Tehran is under pressure at home and aggressive abroad, trying to survive this moment without giving up the pillars of its system. This doesn't mean final decision has already been made, but it does mean the sides are acting as if it could be made at any moment. I'm here, Mati Shoshani, now back to Yair Pinto.
So thank you, Mati Shoshani, for bringing your usual clarity to these vitally important issues. Now, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. How? Very simple. That's the ambassadors of the truth. Share this content with as many people as possible, hit the subscribe button, and pray. So now, we're shifting our focus to Israel's northern arena, because Iran would like to use their proxy Hezbollah as a weapon against Israel in the coming conflict. Israel is aware of that, and we're not waiting for enemies to decide when to attack us, but rather, we are getting out ahead of the problem. For instance, in the last 24 hours, the IDF struck 3 different Hezbollah command centers in Lebanon, eliminating several operatives from its missile launch array. And after they were identified in recent weeks, the accelerated readiness of Hezbollah and the buildup and also planning to launch attacks against Israel, the IDF reacted. So Hezbollah admitted losing 8 operatives in these strikes, which probably means that they lost at least 20 because they're not truthful. But the point is, there is a clear message that while all eyes are on Iran, Israel is already acting to neutralize what could open up from the north. So everybody is wondering if Hezbollah will be smart enough to stay on the sidelines, or will a push from Tehran turn the northern border into an active arena. IDF intelligence believes that we should assume that Hezbollah will join the fighting if Iran is attacked. The scenario being discussed includes large volumes of rocket and missile fire at the north, as well as smaller volumes of long-range missile fire towards the central and attempts to launch swarms of UAVs. Although they have lost much of their capability, Hezbollah is assessed to retain a significant missile inventory, including at least a few thousand short-range rockets for ranges that are between 25 and 35 kilometers, and dozens to a few hundred long-range missiles for ranges that are reaching about 100 kilometers or even more. And at the same time, the IDF notes that its arsenal of suicide drones is growing rapidly, and that the organization intends to strike the north and also strategic sites using its remaining stockpile of precision weapons against Israel. So once again, Israel isn't waiting to see what happens next, but is getting out ahead of the problem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently defined the new doctrine as no more containment, no more campaigns between the wars. If Israel does not hit our enemies while they're weak, they will hit us when they are strong. And the IDF also emphasizes that they are on high alert on the defensive lanes with eyes open for every direction. And also, the finger is on the trigger against any change in the operational reality. The meaning for Beirut is clear. Any fire from the north will be translated into a wide attack on Hezbollah targets and terrorist organizations across Lebanon. And in Jerusalem, they're making it clear that this time, no one is playing